Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Imagine for a second standing in a crowded room. You're maintaining perfect eye contact with a complete stranger, and then suddenly you hear their voice right inside your head.
Just completely bypassing your ears.
Exactly, giving you a direct, highly classified order, and you aren't wearing an earpiece, you aren't holding a phone. It's just a direct, silent broadcast piped right into your skull.
It sounds like pure science fiction.
It really does. But that is the startling scenario at the center of our deep dive today. Welcome back to another deep dive, to you, the learner. Our mission today is unpacking a stack of highly controversial, honestly deeply polarizing source material.
Material that claims this tech isn't sci-fi at all, but a deployed reality.
Right. Specifically, we're looking at this really intense, fascinating interview from the show Redacted. It features Jesse Beltran and Edward Zoll, who are the investigative and production team behind the documentary Died Suddenly.
And the scope of what they're alleging in this interview is just massive. I mean, we are looking at detailed claims that global intelligence agencies have basically moved entirely beyond traditional surveillance.
Like wiretaps and cameras?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And are now actively utilizing nanotechnology, coupled with the global rollout of 6G networks to achieve synthetic telepathy.
Which is a wild term.
It is.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they claim this leads to global mind control. It's a very dense, incredibly dark architectural blueprint of total surveillance.
It's a wild ride of a read, I have to say. And before we jump into the actual mechanics of how they claim all this works, just a quick note on the sources themselves.
Oh, right, the X-link.
Yeah, the final source we were provided, which was a link to x.com outlining some of these network claims, it was actually blocked by our browser's privacy extension.
It's so ironic.
It honestly is a completely fitting coincidence, given that today's entire theme revolves around digital surveillance, bodily autonomy, and, the ultimate invasion of privacy. But before we go literally any further, I need to state something incredibly important. This is a crucial impartiality disclaimer for you, the listener.
Yeah, we really need to put this up front, because these sources contain highly charged political content, some pretty terrifying scenarios, and polarizing conspiracy theory.
Right, and we want to make it absolutely 100% clear we are not taking sides here, nor are we endorsing these viewpoints as objective truth.
Not at all.
Our goal today is simply to act as your guides. We are here to impartially unpack the ideas and the claims exactly as they are contained within the original source material.
We just want you to understand the mechanics of the conversation that's happening out there right now.
Exactly. Because whether you view this as dystopian fiction or dangerous misinformation or, some hidden truth, we are just putting the blueprints of the argument on the table so you can see them.
It's about exploring the text.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the most logical place to begin is really the origin point of these modern claims, right? Which the sources anchor to a very mysterious whistleblower.
Right, this guy who kind of recontextualizes a huge news story.
Exactly. He supposedly recontextualizes a phenomenon that has dominated international news over the last, 5 years. Havana syndrome, or what the government officially likes to call anomalous health incidents.
AHI. Yeah, so the source material describes this whistleblower as an Oxford-educated chemist, which is quite the pedigree, and an MI6 asset who operated as a head of operations in Somalia and across the Middle East.
A very high-level guy.
Yeah, and his primary claim completely flips the mainstream narrative on its head. He says Havana syndrome isn't just a random sickness or some clumsy byproduct of foreign surveillance.
Right, he claims it's intentional.
Yeah, he claims it is the overt symptom of a synthetic telepathy communication system utilized by the Five Eyes, which, just for context for the learner, is the intelligence alliance comprising the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
And the strategic logic outlined in the text here hinges entirely on plausible deniability.
Oh, so?
Well, think about it. If you were a covert asset operating in deeply hostile territory, traditional communication is your biggest liability. Physical drop boxes can be compromised.
You can be followed to them.
Right. And encrypted digital communications, they always leave a metadata trail. Even if they can't read the message, they know you sent one.
That makes sense.
But if an agency can broadcast orders directly into the auditory cortex of an operative via this synthetic telepathy, the physical footprint drops to absolute zero.
Wow.
You can receive a mission update in a silent elevator surrounded by adversaries, and literally no one would know.
I mean, that is basically the holy grail of tradecraft. It's like being issued a highly secure earpiece for a covert But, according to the whistleblower, this system has a deeply malicious dual purpose.
That's a torture aspect.
Yeah, it's like if you don't file your TPS reports, your boss can remotely turn the volume up to a deafening screech on that invisible earpiece. If an asset decides to go rogue or just disobeys a directive, the agency can remotely turn that covert communication channel into a localized torture device.
They literally just dial up the frequency.
Right. And the whistleblower claims that when he attempted to exit the program, this sensory intrusion was weaponized against him so severely that he passed out on his kitchen floor from the agonizing pain.
Just completely blacked out.
Yeah, and he's reportedly suing MI6 in the United Kingdom for damages right now.
And the mechanics of how he was targeted are crucial to point out here. The sources explain that this whistleblower's version of the technology relied on an older, macro-level delivery system.
Meaning something you can actually see.
Right. Specifically, a physical dental implant.
In his tooth.
Yes, in his jaw. This implant supposedly acted as a radio frequency amplifier. So it caught the ambient transmission and translated it into a biological signal that his brain interpreted as sound or, eventually debilitating pain.
Okay, now if you are listening to this, you might be thinking exactly what I was thinking when I read that page.
Why not just go to the dentist?
Exactly. If you have a physical device in your tooth that is causing you to black out from pain on your kitchen floor, why in the world wouldn't you just drive down to a local dentist and demand they extract the tooth?
Well, the investigators actually pressed him on that exact point in the interview.
And what did he say?
His rationale, according to the text, is purely legal. He stated that he deliberately left the physical implant in his jaw because he needed to preserve it as the ultimate physical evidence for his ongoing lawsuit against MI6.
So it's an evidence thing.
Yeah, in his view, removing it breaks the chain of custody. He feels he needs that implant in place to prove his case and actually secure compensation.
Okay, I mean, that is a wild commitment to a lawsuit, but it establishes the baseline for us. We have this older macro version of the alleged technology, a physical piece of hardware you could hypothetically spot on a dental x-ray.
But the source material definitely doesn't stop with covert spies.
No, it does not. The investigators claim the delivery mechanism has undergone this massive, terrifying upgrade, transitioning from just the intelligence community to the global public.
Right. We move from a single physical implant to the realm of nanotechnology.
The micro level.
Exactly. The sources assert that the modern iteration of this surveillance system relies on graphene oxide and specific silicon materials, and they allege these were distributed globally through the COVID-19 vaccines.
Which is obviously a huge, very charged claim.
Very much so. They cite analyses by a Dr. Robert Young and a Dr. Ido Bachelet to back this up in the text.
And the imagery used in the text is staggering. They describe researchers finding, quote, 1 trillion tiny robots inside a single 1 cc syringe.
1 trillion.
Yeah. And according to the claims, these nanoparticles don't just sit there in your arm. They act as miniature antennas or amplifiers. Once they're circulating inside the human bloodstream, they supposedly become highly responsive to specific radio frequencies.
And the network powering this biological grid.
Yeah, where does the signal come from?
The sources point directly to the global rollout of 6G technology, operating on terahertz radio frequencies. What's fascinating here is the sheer technical scale of what is being proposed and the physics they use to justify it.
The terahertz part.
Right. Terahertz frequencies sit right between microwaves and infrared light on the electromagnetic spectrum. They're incredibly fast, dense waves.
And the text makes a specific claim about the political motivation for 6G, right?
Yes. The sources explicitly claim that the U.S. president accelerated the implementation of 6G because, quote, it penetrates deeper into the skin. Yeah. When you shift the technology from a localized tooth implant to trillions of circulating microantennas, you fundamentally alter the human relationship with the digital world. The human body is no longer just holding a device.
It's like a phone.
Right. The biology itself is repurposed into a node on the Internet of Things.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. If we look at the logistics of that claim, a massive contradiction jumps out to me.
The targeting issue.
Exactly. If every human being is now a walking biological node packed with miniature antennas and we are all swimming in an ambient ocean of 6G terahertz waves,
Right.
how does an intelligence agency isolate and beam a synthetic thought to just one specific person? Like, why wouldn't a broadcast scramble the brains of everyone on the entire city block?
It's a great question, and the text attempts to solve that logistical hurdle by introducing the concept of harmonic signatures.
Harmonic signatures, okay.
The investigators describe conducting a human subject trial in the UK where they use specialized equipment designed to detect specific resonant frequencies of silicon. The underlying theory they present is that each individual's biological makeup, combined with these nanoparticles, creates a completely unique harmonic signature.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, it functions basically identically to a static IP address on a computer network.
Oh, so it's like how a dog whistle works. The entire neighborhood is flooded with the physical sound wave, but only the biological receiver that is specifically tuned to that frequency.
The dog.
Right, the dog actually registers the noise. In this scenario, the dog is the unique silicon signature inside a specific person's bloodstream. The agency broadcasts the signal widely, but only the targeted IP address decodes it.
That is the exact mechanism that you're describing. The network is ubiquitous, but the targeting is incredibly granular.
Okay, so the sources have laid out the alleged how. Nanotech amplifiers functioning as IP addresses on a 6G terahertz network. But, building $1 trillion globally ubiquitous infrastructure just to occasionally torture a rogue spy seems like incredible overkill. Yeah. If this network exists on the scale they claim, there has to be a broader endgame. Why do global intelligence agencies want this unprecedented level of access to the human mind?
Well, the sources answer that by connecting these modern technological claims directly to documented historical intelligence operations.
Like MKUltra.
Even earlier. Specifically, they point to the CIA's Project Artichoke from the 1950s and 60s, which was the precursor to the infamous MKUltra program.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Artichoke wasn't just about observation or surveillance. It stated historical goals involved aggressive behavioral engineering. They were actively researching how to chemically or psychologically erase existing memory sets, imprint new false memories, and ultimately create unknowing spies.
Unknowing spies, meaning assets who could be triggered to carry out a mission, gather intelligence, or, commit an act of sabotage and then have absolutely no conscious memory of doing it.
Exactly. They wouldn't even realize they worked for the agency.
That is terrifying.
And the text argues that the human mind remains the last frontier of geopolitical control. If you can conquer the cognitive process, you achieve absolute frictionless control over a population.
Right. No resistance if people don't even know they're being controlled.
Precisely. This is where the psychological implications discussed in the source material cross from sci-fi into deep psychological horror. Think about the cognitive dissonance.
The inability to trust your own thoughts.
Yes. If this technology exists exactly as described, a targeted victim would have no physical way to differentiate between their own organic internal monologue, the voice of their conscience, a profound religious experience like the voice of God, or a synthetically induced thought broadcast directly into their auditory cortex by an operative sitting at a terminal somewhere.
That is, the sources actually bring up deeply tragic real-world examples to frame the stakes of this cognitive hijacking.
They do.
They discuss Aaron Alexis, the perpetrator of the devastating Washington Navy Yard shooting. According to the text, in the weeks leading up to the massacre, Alexis had actually reached out to one of the investigators.
Which is a chilling detail.
Extremely. He claimed he was experiencing the exact symptoms of synthetic telepathy. He was hearing localized voices, feeling relentlessly targeted by invisible frequencies.
And the physical evidence found after the event is what the sources heavily lean on here. After Alexis was killed, investigators found that he had carved the letters ELF into the stock of his rifle.
ELF, which stands for extremely low frequency.
Exactly.
Which is significant because extremely low frequencies have historically been used by the military to communicate with submerged submarines, specifically because those waves can penetrate deep water and solid rock.
And the human brain is mostly water.
Right. So the sources use this specific detail to suggest that individuals who seemingly snap overnight and commit mass violence might not represent a standard psychological break.
They argue these individuals might be activated, unknowing assets.
Or simply victims of synthetic telepathy, who are driven to the absolute brink of insanity by relentless auditory torture.
And they reinforce the geopolitical reality of this arms race by pointing to a 2010 Politico interview with Vladimir Putin.
Oh, I remember reading this part.
Yeah. According to the source, Putin explicitly stated that the first superpower to successfully master psychotronic weapons will be the superpower that ultimately rules the world.
So it's framed not as some fringe conspiracy theory, but as the primary goal of modern statecraft.
Exactly.
To make the sheer invasiveness of this concept relatable, the sources offer this really striking everyday analogy. They say, imagine you are in a relationship and your partner asks you that classic perilous question, does this outfit make me look bad?
A dangerous question on a good day.
Right. And in a normal world, you might formulate a polite white lie to spare their feelings. But the text argues that if your mind is totally exposed, if your neurological signals are transmitting as readable data across this network, the concept of the white lie basically dies.
You can't hide anything.
Right. Your true, unfiltered, organic reaction is captured and exposed instantly. It's essentially the plot of The Matrix, where anyone, at any time, can be hijacked by Agent Smith and turned into an unknowing tool of the state.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources aren't just describing a loss of privacy. They're describing the fundamental dismantling of cognitive freedom. And the most insidious part of the system, according to the text, is how it relies on societal gaslighting to protect itself.
Oh, yeah. Explain how that works in this context, because that was fascinating.
Well, think about it. If a person suddenly starts experiencing a synthetic voice in their head, or anomalous, unexplained physical pain without a physical cause, our society has a default, ingrained reaction to that.
We think they're having a mental breakdown.
Exactly. We institutionalize them. We prescribe them heavy antipsychotics or SSRIs. We dismiss them as medically insane. The text argues that this built-in societal reflex provides the perfect cover. It makes it incredibly easy for intelligence agencies to operate this technology with absolute impunity, because the moment a victim tries to report the abuse, the nature of the crime makes them sound like they have totally lost their grip on reality.
So the weapon hides behind the diagnosis of schizophrenia.
That's the argument, yes.
Which brings up a terrifying logistical question regarding the scope of this alleged threat. Like, if this network of nanotechnology and 6G terahertz waves is truly ubiquitous, is there any physical escape? Can you line your house with lead, put on a tinfoil hat, or just, move off the grid into the deep woods?
According to the sources, the answer is a definitive no.
Really? No escape at all?
None. They argue that the popular conception of directed energy weapons, like the idea of a suspicious white van parked down the street aiming a parabolic dish at your bedroom window, is actually a deliberate psychological operation.
A psyop?
Yes, a psyop designed to misdirect the public's understanding of the technology.
Right, because if you believe the threat is just a guy in a truck down the road, you still have the illusion of agency. You think you can just get in your car, drive to the country, and escape the beam.
Precisely the point the text makes. The sources claim the real network isn't a single directional beam. It is an inescapable, fully integrated global web of satellites and dense cell tower arrays.
Then they test this, right?
They do. To prove the penetrating power of this grid, the investigators describe an experiment they conducted in Jackson, California.
Okay.
They took targeted individuals down into deep granite caverns, 2 miles underground.
2 miles.
Yeah. A depth where there is absolutely no ambient cell service, no standard FM radio transmission, nothing. And according to the investigators, their equipment was still detecting the specific signal penetrating millions of tons of solid earth.
Wow. So the picture they paint is absolute. A ubiquitous, inescapable satellite network beaming mind-altering frequencies deep into the Earth, interacting with trillions of nanobots circulating inside our bloodstreams.
Very bleak.
It is a bleak, apocalyptic, almost suffocating narrative. But this is exactly where the source material takes an incredibly jarring turn regarding commercial cures.
Yeah, the transition in the text is severe.
Very.
After outlining the inescapable nature of the threat, the solutions offered are highly specific commercial protocols.
Supplements, basically.
Right. One of the investigators highlights a company called Human Consciousness Support, which is run by a CEO named Matt Hazen. They claim this specific company has developed a proprietary blood protocol.
And what does it supposedly do?
According to their cited UK trials, they allege this protocol successfully reduced silicon indicators, which they identify as the raw building blocks of these nanobots, by an average of 74.6% in the subjects' bodies.
Okay, and right in the middle of this intensely heavy discussion about the total loss of human sovereignty and the end of free will, the interview abruptly pauses for a sponsor read.
Yeah, it really takes you by surprise.
And we have to highlight this because it is embedded directly in the text we are analyzing. The host stops to pitch a product from the wellness company. It is a direct advertisement for a 3-month supply of tirzepatide B6/B12 sublingual tablets designed for weight loss.
And they go deep into the biological mechanics of the pill, explaining how it targets GLP-1 and GIP receptors.
Right.
For context, these are hormones that regulate the communication between your gut and your brain, altering how your body responds to bad fats and sugars and curbing cravings without the need for injections.
And the ad read wraps up by offering the listener a promo code, quote, redacted, for $34 off and free shipping.
Right.
So what does this all mean? As an analyst of this media landscape, the tonal whiplash here is genuinely staggering to process.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, in one breath, we are deep in the weeds of existential horror, discussing the dawn of global cognitive slavery, the weaponization of the human bloodstream, and the terrifying theory that mass shooters are mind-controlled intelligence assets. And then, without missing a single beat, we seamlessly pivot to a promo code for fast-absorbing sublingual weight loss tablets. It is an incredibly surreal juxtaposition of profound, world-ending dread sitting comfortably right alongside everyday, consumerism.
It perfectly highlights a unique ecosystem within modern alternative media. The threat presented is always global, existential, and seemingly insurmountable. But the proposed solutions, or the adjacent advertisements, are hyper-individualized commercial wellness products.
Exactly.
You can't stop the 6G satellite grid, but hey, you can buy a supplement to optimize your GLP-1 receptors.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you, the listener. If you're driving to work or making dinner right now, you might be thinking, well, this has officially crossed into comic book supervillain territory. Why did we spend time deep diving into these specific extreme sources today?
It's a fair question.
Because regardless of whether you view the claims of graphene oxide antennas and MI6 synthetic telepathy as a terrifying hidden truth or as complex weaponized misinformation, this text perfectly encapsulates the anxieties of our modern era.
It really acts as a fascinating mirror, reflecting a profound growing distrust across multiple pillars of society.
Yeah, breaking down the trust.
What we are reading is the manifestation of a deep historical distrust in global intelligence agencies, a lingering pervasive anxiety regarding pharmaceutical interventions and bodily autonomy following the pandemic, and an underlying societal unease about the incredibly rapid, invisible, and poorly explained pace of wireless technology like 6G.
It is the ultimate fear that we are losing control of our own bodies and our own minds in an increasingly connected digital world. The anxiety driving these theories is very, very real, even if people fundamentally disagree on the physical mechanisms causing it.
And that leads to a final thought I want to leave you with, building on the core theme of cognitive control we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
The source material is deeply concerned with the idea of shadowy intelligence agencies forcibly hacking our minds using injected nanotechnology and inescapable satellite signals. But it raises a much more immediate question for our daily lives. Between the algorithmic feeds that relentlessly curate our reality, the endless doom-scrolling perfectly engineered to spike our dopamine, and the targeted advertising that maps our behavioral harmonic signature so well it knows what we want to buy before we even consciously register the desire.
Oh, wow.
Have we already voluntarily surrendered our cognitive freedom to the smartphones currently sitting in our pockets without needing a single injection?
Man. Now, that is a question to keep you up at night. The X-ray machine of truth might be broken, but we hope we helped you navigate the muddy waters today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, for being curious, and for trusting us to help you unpack the noise. We will catch you on the next one.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.